Hello, Matt.
Hey Graham, it's great to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome, everyone, to Crazy in Love, the podcast where two therapists talk about all things to do with relationships. Matt, communication between couples, easy as ABC, as
Yeah.
regularly come back to. There is a few techniques in the world of couples therapy, including from the likes of the Gottmans and others, that we talk about regularly on the podcast. And we thought it would be useful to just go into them in a bit more detail to help couples understand what we mean and how they could utilize some of those techniques. You're coming to this conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, thinking that there are one or two techniques that are pretty much applicable in any situation.
Yeah. I'd say so. There's one in particular,
One
that
in
sort of
particular,
ABC
ABC.
approach.
Yeah. So I suggest, unless you've got a better idea, that we start
Yeah.
by really going through that ABC technique and use some case studies, some ideas of couples having
Yeah.
conversations about some tricky issues where that might work. And so that
Yeah.
by the end of the episode, people can really take away what we mean and how to use it in their own relationship, maybe with a few challenges and pushbacks from me on when I
Yeah.
think it
Sure.
might not be.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. Push back and challenge. So I'm sort of flogging this as the answer to everything. Let's start with that assumption in mind, and you can tell me whether it really does solve all of your couple's problems and all of your own very many problems and failings in your relationship. Huh?
Good, good. I,
So I'm not sure where this is from, truthfully. I couldn't claim it as my own, but I think the applicability to it in therapy, in couples work, I haven't seen, but it strikes me as a useful tool, and it strikes the people I work with as a useful tool. So it is as simple as ABC. The A is that we acknowledge what the other person says, and that's really the point to pause on, because that's the thing everybody does wrong and everybody objects to and everybody assumes they're doing, but very few people are actually truly honestly doing that in any meaningful way. So the question and challenge that I often get is, when they come at me or when they want something from me or when they bring me a problem or when they tell me about their day, I don't know what to do, or he doesn't know what to do, or she doesn't know what to do. They get it wrong, they disappoint me in some way, they drop into problem solving mode, or they're passive, or they do an eye roll or whatever else. And the A of the model is that we need to first off acknowledge what is being said to us. And what that does not mean is that we agree with it or we try and understand it. We are just acknowledging what's being said.
so give us an example. So I come home from work and I say, I know I didn't mention it at the time, but this morning over breakfast, you dismissed. I made you a nice breakfast and you didn't even say thank you, and it's been on my mind ever since.
Yeah, what happens? I'm going to tell you what goes wrong first. No, I didn't. I did say, well, you weren't listening. Well, I was putting the
Good.
bins out.
Yep.
So what more often happens is somebody goes off on one, or somebody would say, well, I make you breakfast every morning. Well, I was doing the coffee and the kids, and you didn't say thank you about that.
Yeah.
If you didn't want to do it for me, why did you do it? I shouldn't have to say. So that's sort of where we go. And there'd be like, I could do you 10 more of those kind of defensive, defended, upset, hurt, no, I do more than you. Well, I do every bit as much as you. Responses. But the acknowledgement would be as simple as, yeah, you're right, you did. And that was really nice. And I'm sorry I didn't say thank you. You're right. I did try and say thank you, but you were doing another thing. You
Okay.
might add something to it, but
So,
basically you
so
would
pause
acknowledge
there.
that's what's being said.
So pause. It feels like you've gone beyond acknowledge already. So
Mhm.
instead of just, oh, you're upset that I didn't say thank you, would be a kind of just almost mirroring back exactly what was said to you. So because you started to build already, even an apology feels like it's building something. It's kind
I
of
agree. I agree it is. I think you're absolutely right about that. But I suppose the natural segue is then to that. Could you build on something? So the B of the
yeah.
model is
Let's pause on build, because
Yep.
build is the bit that I think is the most additional or potentially confusing bit of the
I
AB.
agree. I agree entirely with that. I think it's the hardest thing. And it's hard to, I mean, we're keeping these things separate because we're diagramming it out, aren't we, so to speak? But nothing in the real world is a diagram. It's much closer to tree roots. It's all sort of mushed up, isn't it? beneath the surface. But if we were separating it out, it would be, yeah, and sometimes people just practice it in a clunky way. I acknowledge what you're saying to me. I acknowledge you were saying you were disappointed that I didn't recognize the effort you've made. And in the first instance, that would be fine. If this is learning, I would think this is a bit like learning a new language. That's how I put it to people. So if this is learning a new language, your conversational Spanish or French at first will be a bit clunky. So I acknowledge that I didn't say thank you for that, and whatever else. And
Yeah.
the build of it would be, it was lovely. I really appreciate it when you do those things. Like, it was nice to be on the receiving end of that. I did spot what you'd done for me. I did take notice of it, and I want those
Also,
things in our relationship as well. The build would be, these things matter to me as well. I get what you're saying, and it matters to me, and I share that kind of value. I share that thing. That's what I want for our relationship, for us to be able to do those things, and for us to be very ready in acknowledging, like, the kind and helpful, appreciative things that we do for one another.
okay, so the build is often a move back to a kind of broader principle, a broader.
Yeah, sometimes I think, yeah, or just something shared. Like, I hate it when we row as well, would be a build.
Right,
I'm really, I acknowledge you said you didn't like it when that thing happened, and I get it, right? You know,
yeah. Yeah, in
and
your shoes, I would be upset too. I want the set.
not quite though,
No.
right? Because that
Okay.
might go a little bit further. So I acknowledge that you were upset, but I don't. I am, when we get to the C bit, the challenge back, it's like, I think you might have overdone the getting upset bit. Is what
Right.
you are entitled
Let's stay
to
with
say.
build. Let's stay with build because this is I still think this is the most confusing bit of
Uh-huh. Yeah.
it. So let's take another example.
Look, why don't we take the example we talk about a lot, which is, you never can come home from work on time, or I never
Yes.
know what time you're coming home, or something. So
Yes.
the acknowledge in that instance is, this is frustrating for the person on the receiving end of somebody who doesn't always turn up on time. And it may well be because there are really good reasons they get stuck at work, right? Let's say there are in this instance. But if I'm the person stuck at work, and I also don't like being there stuck at work, and sometimes having to jump on calls that overrun, or jump on calls at an unreasonable hour, I would acknowledge that you feel like it's annoying, it's disrespectful. Is there not more you could do? I'm constantly feeling like I'm second best to your bloody job. The build, if I am the person who's stuck at work coming home late and acknowledging that that's frustrating for you, the build would be like, I find that annoying as well. I want to be more reliable and dependable. I like coming home and us having family time together. I want to see the kids. I want to take part in family life too. Like, I share the same ambition as you. I share some of the frustration that you're feeling. This is important to me.
What about if that is not true? What
Sure.
about if we're talking about an ambitious person that loves their job? Yes, likes coming home, but has no real preference to come home before bath time, before dinner time, likes kind of hanging out with their kids at the weekend, but sees Monday to Friday as work time. Where is the build there potentially?
Yeah, I think it's a good challenge. It's a harder one, isn't it? I think in the end, unless you truly hate family life and don't want to play a part in it, and don't see yourself having a role in that, there would be something to build on, which is, on Wednesdays, I do like to be home early and do that thing I couldn't be this week. So you wouldn't be getting into something broader. You would be capping it, or like, I wanted to come home at least in time for bath and bed, or for story, or for whatever it was, right?
So
And
it is.
then I think you might be then wanting to shift and move. And I know you're slowing it down for good reasons. I think you're right to do so. But the way you would do it more organically is, how hard this is for me. I've only been in that job for a short while. This boss is unreasonable. Why we're doing this. We've agreed that we're trying to clear an amount of money in order to, or all the while we're trying to get the move underway. Those kinds of things. That the challenge here is
Okay.
for me as well as for you. That even that bit could be a shared bit.
So one thing I often say to couples is something along the lines of, if you're in a conversation that feels a bit like an argument and you notice yourself trying to persuade your partner
Yeah,
of your position,
yeah,
probably in a bit of a trap. You're probably in a bit of
yeah.
a hole. There's something in the move. We're now moving on to the kind of challenge bit of it.
Yeah.
or counter? Well, you prefer challenge, right? For this.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think counter is just as good, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So there's something about kind of bringing a different perspective in there. So acknowledge and building is very much about trying to make the other person feel heard, seen, understood,
Yeah,
and you share concern about that issue, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's collaborative. You're gonna try and work together on this. It's not just you're responding with your position too quickly, but the move to the C, the counter the challenge, there might be a bit of persuading in there. There might be a bit of persuading about kind of, can you see it from my perspective? Can you see
yeah.
it
There's
from where
definitely
I
that. But I mean, perspective taking would be the other way of framing this, wouldn't it? Or the headline above it all. So I think in that instance, if you wanted to challenge back, you wanted to push back, you wanted to confront that person with something, you wanted to contradict something of what they've said, you're then pushing it back to them and the thing flips. So I've now said to you, it's really hard for me at work at the moment. You know, there is a lot of pressure on. We're facing down an organizational restructure. I don't know what the implication is for me and my team or my area of the business. So I just have to be around at the moment. And that is how it is.
Yep.
So
Yep.
not particularly yielding, not particularly, soft or like we're trying to really create anything at that point. I am saying back to you in the plainest terms possible, not rude, not aggressive, not looking for this to go high, but like it's really hard for me at the moment, and I don't feel like you get that. And then your job is to acknowledge that perspective, right? And to build
Yeah.
on, yeah, okay, we do want this job, like we do have commitments to rest on it, like we do want to example hard work to the kids or whatever. I'm on your B would be I'm on board with all of this, but it's too much, but it can't go on. I can't do 4 more years of it, or I want us to take a long break over the summer.
Mm. What are the traps in this model? So you've talked when we
There
were
are none. There are none. It's road tested and it's ready to go.
so the acknowledge point, you said that people get into a trap before they acknowledge. So they move too quickly into the probably the bit of it which we would describe as challenge or counter. They're trying to persuade, they're trying to defend
Yeah.
themselves.
Trying to defend their position usually is what I would say I see in the work in the rooms when we're in session with people. It's mostly a defensive maneuver, which is like, how very dare you? I'm only doing this job for the good of the family. Those kind of big categorical statements are the ones that I hate.
Yeah. So I
Because you're
imagine,
feeling under the cosh, aren't you? It's like
yeah.
I'm working really hard here, and like all you do is like moan at me.
Yeah, and there's the trap in the counter part of the ABC model, which is you're falling into the trap of persuading with character assassinations and overly black and white statements and defensive statements at that point. So you do the first two steps of acknowledge and build pretty well, but you're still coming on a bit too strong.
You might be. What I find genuinely in my life, and often when clients are doing this, though, the mere fact that you have got a process in
Yeah.
place causes you to pause and think and step through it as a mental model. What do I need to do now? I need to acknowledge what's being said to me. They are really fed up because I said I'd be home and I'm not. Once that bit's being done, something is softening, right? If you're looking for the build, what's the building in? What am I trying to build on? I like family life. I like having dinner together. Sometimes I like being away from work and not. By that point, you're like, you're somewhere different from the how very dare you. Or you are also rude, or you also let me down, or there was this time 2 years ago when you were rude to which
Yeah.
is often what it triggers if we're really quickly whacking it back.
That's interesting. So, in your experience, it almost kind of not softens, doesn't feel quite the right word, but it becomes less heated, that challenge part, from the
Yeah.
very fact that someone is more methodically and deliberately working through the ABC model.
Yeah, a bit of slow mo, isn't it?
Yeah,
Almost. It's sort of
taking a breath, taking a beat.
eyes on the ball in the tennis. It's like rushing the shot. You got your racket head back at the. You're properly thinking this through. Go on the B of the bang. It's like you're sort of really tuning into a process. It's like what's getting said to me. I think it feels more technical, forensic, or
Mm.
skilled than it does soft or yielding or any of that stuff, which I think other people, if they like that language and that's how they think about life being best lived, then fine, do that translation. But for the people I'm talking to, they're often looking to maximize a skill or reduce a conflict or solve a problem, and I think this has got the potential to help you solve a problem. The other reason I would bring in a bit of tennis is you're just knocking it back to one another. It's like you don't get to keep knocking balls at someone or run round, grab the ball and knock it at them again. You're trying to knock that conversational ball into their court. So this thing that you did earlier on in the day kind of bugged me, pissed me off, and then the other person can play that back. I get what you're saying to me. I share some of that, but I don't like it when you come at me with that tone, or I think it's unreasonable, or I think you're overdoing it. But that would do it. That's the entirety of it. The ball now back in that person's court. Yeah, pissed off was too strong. I shouldn't have sat on that. I have been harboring that for a couple of days, and it was a bit all encompassing what I said to you right now.
Good.
Something
Good.
like something like that.
Yes.
It's also not an apology, right? I don't know where you want to go with this, but I would say one important thing to say is I very often get into when somebody acknowledges something, they immediately want to say sorry for it. And I am not in the least bit interested. It plays no part in the model. And I'm really only interested if sorry means I'm not going to do it again. So the sorry bit doesn't help me out at all. I really under index on that. And I don't think it helps couples very much either. So it's like I acknowledge the world from your perspective. I share some of that perspective. I
Yeah.
can I can build on it now. And I want to counter, or I want to put something else to you. I want to say that these are not the most helpful moments in the day to talk about it, rather than I hear it from your perspective and I'm really sorry and I'll try not to do it again. I'm sorry, but there's sometimes you just drive me mad, or I'm sorry, but sometimes I get stressed with stuff, and sorry, but I've got a load of things going on at work at the moment. Because it doesn't usually come off as a sorry in the first instance. And I am trying to understand it. Like you're coming at me with something which I wasn't expecting and I don't like. And I am personally not sorry in the first instance that often. I've got to see it. I've got to get behind it. I've got to make sense of this from our view of the world. I've got to build somewhere, and I've got to give you my two penneth as well before I can get even close to being, do you know what? That thing I do must be annoying. And I would like to apologize now for it, but in a meaningful way, in a way that's landed rather than, something less than that.
Yeah, where I wanted to go
Yeah.
was what are we trying to achieve with this model, the ABC
Mm.
model? And I
Mm.
think talking about apologies and being sorry is a useful entry point to that, because you're not seeking an apology. You're not seeking a consensus necessarily or seeking
Yeah.
agreement. You're seeking a way of working through feelings, differences in
Yeah.
a way that's more mature, in a way that leads to greater understanding. It doesn't necessarily eliminate frustration, but it takes the heat out of those.
Yeah, you've been heard, haven't you? Which I
Yeah.
think is in danger of sounding really soppy. But I think in a work context, in a professional context, in a bunch of other contexts, we're not really insistent on getting our way, but we do want to be heard and understood. And that's the bit. I think sorry sometimes just quickly breezes over a thing without really doing it justice. So if you were coming at me with something which felt unreasonable, or I could acknowledge but didn't understand, I would also stay with that. I would be like, I don't get it. I'm not arguing back, but I don't get it. Help me understand it. When you say that, what do you mean by, So the kind of idea of assertive communication or assertively putting your request across is probably well understood in professional context, but there is a sort of assertive listening. I don't know what you mean. This isn't making sense. This doesn't compute. This isn't how I see things. So can you go at that again? Can you be patient with me? Can you try and put it in a different way? Or can you give me an example of what you're talking about?
Well, that's why I like this
Good
model.
examples of I'm trying to acknowledge that, but I don't get it. I don't know what you're on about.
That's why I like this model, because it's fun. Although I, was alluding to some challenge and some pushback, I do like the
Hmm.
model because it is more about listening than asserting.
Yeah.
So the kind of classic ones from the likes of the Gottmans and others are more, when you do X in situation Y, I feel Z. It's
Yeah, sure.
about me. It's much more about
Yeah.
how do I tell you how I'm feeling, and it's all about the self, and it's all about the prioritization of my feelings. And I think our approach to couples work is much more about the couple finding some sort of mutual understanding and acknowledging difference as well, and trying to make their way through that difference, rather than it's all about one person's feelings and they have to be dealt with, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
So
yeah. I think honestly, there's not, right. There's a whole load of things in life which are somewhat binary, aren't there? Where you're going to live if you're moving, whether you're going to be nearer to one person's parents than another's where you're going to school your kids in terms of the geography, or whether you're going to, send them to this kind of school with an entrance exam or a fee attached to it, or you're going to send them to a local school. Like you can't send them to both, right? So that bit, I think the model works at the level of transaction. This kind of thing in the morning happened, and it pisses me off that I'm always left to do the kids' bag, or I'm always the one worrying about, like, whether they left money for the cleaner or whatever it might be, and other middle class examples I could come up with. But it could also be like, how on earth do we have a discussion about where we want to live when I think we come at it from a different starting point? I really want to be near the water, the beach, the city, my parents.
Yep.
That you
Yeah.
could just step through it like that. So I don't think this gives you a resolution some of the time, but I actually don't know that we're looking for a resolution. The thing that causes problems in couples relationships, as I would see it, and the things that brings them into me or to you, are they just don't fucking listen. They're so disrespectful.
Yeah.
We are
Yeah.
rude to one another. We
Yeah.
put one another down. We are careless about one another's point of view,
Yeah.
and we always, often, sometimes, most of the time, fail to appreciate one another. And I think what the model is doing as well is just, we're appreciating the world from your point of view. So you can say anything. I'm not agreeing with it, but I am acknowledging that seems to be on your mind, and you seem to be sincere about it.
And there's a big chunk of one of the other acronyms that I was thinking about before the conversation was the ruler one, that RULER, that comes from, I think it's Yale, and a lot of their work on kind of emotional regulation and the regulation before communication. I'll put it in the show notes. I won't go
Yeah,
into it.
sure.
But I think the big chunk that makes acknowledgement hard in the ABC model is that emotional regulation piece beforehand. You
Yeah,
just step through the door and you're challenged by your partner with something that you've done wrong.
yeah,
It's that step of, before I respond from this feeling, this emotion, can I take a beat? Can I
yeah,
access my prefrontal cortex? Can I take a
yeah,
helicopter view of what's going on here, and realize that I'm moving into defensive mode, realize that I'm about to snap, realize that I'm irritable? Can I just kind of buy myself 30 seconds, 5 minutes to just go and have a shower after work and say, can we talk about this in five? And then enact the ABC model. So there might be a kind of
yeah. I like it, but I don't think you need to do that. I think the model is precisely that, which is like, look, I know you're pissed off about this. I get it, right? But and I am too. I don't want us to argue all the time, but I've just got in the door.
yeah. But
As long as I stop there and don't say, you always do this, this is the problem in this relationship. If I stop there, what are you going to say that is meaningful and real if your intent is genuinely to solve a problem? This model doesn't solve a problem if you're not serious about it, right? But like any coaching activity, you've got to want to do it. If you want to do it, what would you say? Can I just jump through the shower first, please? Can we eat? I'm absolutely,
yeah.
what would you genuinely say to that? My guess would be, I mean, answer if you like, but my guess would be like, fine, okay, fair enough. You have
Yeah.
just got in.
Yes. Most of the time. It requires both parties to be accessing the model, though, doesn't it? Rather than, no, this has been on my mind all day, I've been stewing on it, we need to talk about this now.
Yeah. But I mean that would be okay. I think if you said, well, it's been on my mind all day, we need to talk about this. I don't know. Now's not perfect, is it? But as soon as possible. Now is a proxy for as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Like if you give that back to me, I'm like, I know, I get it. I sense that it's been on your mind.
Yeah.
You sent me umpteen texts, or it's been on my mind as well. I want to resolve it, but like, let me change, please. Let me jump through the shower. Let's do dinner together, or let's get the kids to bed. Or, I don't want to do this again this evening, because we won't, I don't think, resolve it easily. I think we need to do this, having booked a babysitter and gone out somewhere and whatever else. Or we need to take it to couples therapy. We need a bit of help with this, or whatever else
Yeah.
it might be. Just
Well,
because you want to talk about it now, it's just not the final word. And I see guys in particular who cave on this point because somebody
yeah.
is coming at them, usually a woman is coming at them with strong emotions, and therefore, and what happens is not listening, not acknowledging, just like da 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 da, in one ear out the other, she'll shut up soon, which is as every bit as destructive as it's a fuck you in a different way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredibly patronizing, but it's a kind of learned skill almost. right? I just need to ride
Mm.
this out. It's if feelings
Yeah.
are a bit scary, I just need to ride the wave of the feeling, and then everything will go back to normal type
Yeah.
approach. Head in the sand, almost.
And
Yeah,
if you genuinely, in that example, want to talk about it soon, but you want to talk about it with actual me, and I'm telling you, I'm actually tired and not in a position to at the moment, then you've got to pause, haven't you?
yeah,
You know, it's like the shit fit isn't really available to you at that
yeah,
point. So,
yeah.
well, do it, but it's not going to get you anywhere. You would just be acting out a set of emotions. And it's not, I think for most people, like the request to pause, pick it up at a later stage, whether that's 5 or 10 minutes later, whether that's after dinner, or whether actually like it can't be done tonight because we've tried this 4 or 5 times and it ends up, worse than it started.
Mm, mm. What we didn't do right at the beginning is kind of clarify when we would draw on this model, because you're not going to go around
All the
24/7
time, 24/7.
thinking ABC, ABC. It would,
Well, I don't know, Graham. I mean, that's interesting because I think I would advise people to do an awful lot of that at first and to meet almost everything that comes in the form of a challenge in that way.
no, but that's fine. That if you're saying it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
If it's something that you might disagree on, if it's you're not necessarily
Well,
what.
let's take an example maybe that's at the other end of the scale. So
Yeah,
something sort of fun, like
yeah,
I really want to go there on holiday, or I'd
yeah.
love to go there on holiday. I think you would use the model, which is I can acknowledge that you would like that. It looks lovely, you know.
I mean, Matt, if you did that to me every time I open my mouth, I would want to punch you in the face pretty quickly.
No, I don't. No, I genuinely don't think you would. I think that in at the level of skill building, it's a bit clunky and it's obvious, and you can sort of see the architecture, can't you? But I think if you said you'd always wanted to go to, where have you always wanted to go to? Somewhere peculiar in Eastern Europe, I would imagine, Graham. Where is it?
Me?
Yeah, where do you want to go?
I'd like to go to Tokyo, is where I'd like to go.
Okay, so I knew it would be quirky. I just got the wrong region of the world. You want to go to Tokyo. I think you do want somebody to acknowledge something about that. So if you said that to me, I'd be like, oh, that's curious. I haven't heard that many people say that Tokyo is the place they want to go. So I'd be like, I would acknowledge that that is somewhat, distinct, right?
Yeah.
And then the build on it would be something like, I don't know, I don't know that much about it. Like, tell me what really appeals, or I'm intrigued by
Yeah.
that. What is
Yeah.
it in particular you want? Is it the food culture, or is it the, you know,
So that's brought in a different element of the build bit for me, which is
yep,
asking questions. So you're not
sure.
kind of building it necessarily by bringing your perspective.
No, sure, you're not. No, not entirely. No,
You
not
say, well,
solely.
so what you didn't do there is that's an interesting place. I'm also interested in going to interesting places. So you're not necessarily building in that way. What you're doing
No,
is asking questions to expand and show
yeah.
curiosity and interest
Yes,
there,
yeah.
which is helpful.
Because I think if you can't build, then it's false, isn't it? And there should be nothing false, I think, in any endeavor, right? But certainly not in this one. So I might need something. I might need you to tell me a bit more. And you might. I mean, I wouldn't worry about whether it's a build stage or an acknowledge stage, but I would probably say it's at the acknowledge stage.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the first thing about Tokyo. Tell me what's good, and then you might say, what would you say?
What would I say?
Yeah, what's going to whet my appetite for Tokyo?
Culture.
To me, it's a long way, and it's an alien culture, Graham. I'm so surely the south of France would do, wouldn't it?
So I talked to you probably about unique culture, great food, cherry blossoms,
Yeah,
temples,
yeah,
day trip to various places outside of Tokyo. Lots to do.
lots to do. Yeah, yeah. So some of those things might appeal. The train journeys might appeal. The cherry blossom might
Okay.
appeal.
Okay. It's got to.
The real sense of like, wow, this is wildly different. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can get back in touch with an adventurous
Yeah.
side to this relationship or
Yeah.
friendship. We used to do those things. We used to talk about that back in the day, didn't we? I think you could
And now we go
find.
to the same old chalet in the south of France with the same food.
It's not a chalet. So that would be okay. And I would say yeah, the thing for me is, and
Yes.
then what's the challenge for me there? It would be like it sounds unrelaxing,
It sounds expensive. It
It
sounds
sounds a long
sounds
way. It sounds like a
intense.
long
Yeah.
haul flight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I happen to know have got 3 children.
Yeah.
That's like there's a cost involved, isn't
They
there?
are not coming.
Are they are they going to be amused by this? Are they going to admire the cherry blossom? So we might say that, and the challenge might be I'd love to, but
Yeah.
what do you think? Is this something that we do on the sabbatical? We've talked about traveling a bit. Is this, is there a period of time where your parents can step up and look after them? Is this a thing we do
Yeah.
on our own? How do we make that happen? How do you see it working? Given that we're also renovating the thing or fixing the roof, I don't see it happening this year though. And then you immediately say, no, 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 it's not this year. This
Yeah.
is, this is a dream, this is something 5, 10 years hence, or I think we should
Yeah.
like bugger the roof.
And where do you in your life or in your couple sessions, where does this model kind of almost reach its end point? I don't mean reach its limits, but there's almost like an endless loop of ABC, isn't there? There's almost
There
like
is, there is a perpetual loop
yeah.
where we're always acknowledging one another. I'm going to answer that question by avoiding it. This comes from, at least in my world, in my understanding, it comes from classrooms and particularly from younger kids. But it never really stops in education, in good education. That the children are always, I'm making the sign of an A. They are always in agreement with what's being said to them. That they're getting it, or they would like to build. They've also been on holiday. If they're learning about the major waterways of Europe, they've been on holiday there, or they've seen something, or they have a point of view and they'd like to contribute it, or they would like to challenge back. They've got a thought that contradicts what's being said to them, or potentially clarifies it, or they've got some kind of question they want to challenge on. So the children are never looking out the window, never bored. They're always on their toes. They could always be called
Nice.
upon, and they are always agreeing with what's being said to them, building on something of their own experience or their own point of view, or they'd like to challenge because they've misunderstood something, they haven't grasped something, or they've got a different point of view or an example that they think
Good.
contrasts with what's being said to them.
Good. Well,
What
I'm going to
actually happens in our least effective classrooms is people just, they're out the window, they're switched off, they never knew what was being discussed anyway, and no one's going to call on them. And I think it's the same in relationships. People switch off. This will go away. Let's just eat dinner and she'll forget. Let's just, if we move on, he'll change his mind, or I'll just book it and like he'll be fine with it.
so I'm going to close this off by acknowledging that
Yes.
the ABC model has been really quite useful in your life and your clinical work. I'm going to build
Yes. Yes.
by saying I've found this conversation genuinely helpful in expanding my understanding of it and bringing it into other areas of couples work that I hadn't necessarily considered, the more kind of positive, joyful.
Sure. Yeah.
But then I'm going to challenge us by saying we're pretty much out of time and we need to draw the conversation to a close. Does that count? Does that count as a challenge?
Good. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's fine. That's
All right.
absolutely fine. Yeah, I think you're genuinely we're trying to do things in those component parts and do it imperfectly. If it was conversational Spanish, which still think is or French is the best example, it's a bit clunky at first. And will it suffice? Can you get the croissant of your choice? Have you ended up with the chicken and not the seafood? It's like you'll make mistakes with this, and couples do all the time. But I think it's a model to keep you on track.
Lovely. Good to
All
see
right.
you.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Take
Nice
care.
to- Bye.
Bye.